Welcome back to Sextras,
where we talk about sex and all the extras.
Yes, I'm Honey, and my fun fact is I have Maria's hand tattooed on my arm.
Cutie.
So cutie.
I'm Maria and I love card games. Well, we have a great episode for you guys this week.
Yes.
Talking about our foreign boyfriends and, well, talking about what it's like to date someone from a different country and some differences we've found, and then more generally dating someone that's kind of different to you and how to go about that. But you will see that as we go ahead.
But we first want to introduce a little thing that we are testing out where we talk about things we have seen on the internet this week, and we want to just discuss them. They'll be obviously related to sex and relationships and anything else in that general category. I think usually we will have this at the end of the episode. We decided to introduce this, just explain the general kind of idea. You guys can send us stuff you've seen on the internet if you're like, oh, that would be so relevant, or like maybe they'd like talking about that.
Yeah, we kind of just want to basically answer a little question, bring up something at the end of every episode. It sometimes will be related, sometimes it won't be related to the topic. We're going to give you a few examples of the kind of thing that we want to achieve in this little segment that we're going to bring in for you guys. Do you want to start us off?
I saw this on Reddit and it says, my girlfriend hates that I play video games. She has never explicitly said I hate you playing games, but every time I do spend time to myself, it feels like I am given different treatment. She won't speak to me normally or will be completely silent. I was never popular, blah, blah, blah. I played games, it was my escape. And now I feel bad, but I shouldn't feel bad for having time to myself. I recently spent £900 on a gaming PC and I have played next to no time because I feel guilty for it. Okay. I mean, I feel like I would be mad if my boyfriend was spending more than £900 on gaming equipment. But I think if it is like your way to escape, then yeah, I think it's your personal time is so important, and that's definitely something I'm learning, living with my boyfriend 24/7 after being in a long distance relationship. And yeah, maybe you're just the kind of person that needs a lot of alone time, and I think the most important thing is to just explain why it is you need that time to yourself and like how it helps you, because sometimes people just really don't understand that. Like, my boyfriend's an extrovert, he doesn't understand needing a lot of alone time. I'm an only child as well, so I'm just used to like having my time to myself. Like, I get to do what I want and live my own life. So yeah, if it helps you relax and like it's something you really enjoy, maybe she won't understand, but like you can kind of come to some kind of arrangement. And I also think maybe the money has something to do with it, unless she doesn't know, because like, yeah, I would be kind of mad if someone was doing that like on one thing, especially if you live together. I think it's just considerate to like discuss it with her and make sure she feels fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that it's not that she doesn't like you playing video games, she would just rather you were spending time with her. That's kind of my take on it. But then if there's like a lack of communication, then no one's gonna make each other happy, really. Everyone has like little pet peeves that their boyfriend or girlfriend do, like little things that they do. I mean, my boyfriend plays a lot of video games and we live together, so I'm guilty of getting annoyed about the video games. But I do completely agree with your message of, spending time by yourself, and that's important, and you have to respect that other people have to do that too. Like, you shouldn't expect someone to hang out with you all the time. Completely fair enough.
Yeah, and I think everyone has their own way of spending their alone time as well. Like, I might want to watch just shit YouTube videos for like 8 hours, not move from my bed, whereas my boyfriend would go for a fucking bike ride and like write music in his alone time, which is like not chill time to me. That's like being productive. So yeah, everyone like has different ways. So hopefully she will understand if you talk to her about it.
Yeah, well, we asked you guys like what some of your pet peeves were about your partner.
So someone said not being critical enough.
I think, they want their partner to be mean to them, but in like a...
Oh, to them. I thought this was like mean to other, like about other people.
No, or maybe about other people, actually. Fair enough. Okay.
No, but like I do get the being mean to them thing. Like you want them to like give you like constructive criticism, but also like just joke around and be like, "Oh, you're a piece of shit."
Yeah. Someone else said my ex would climb on his bed and mine with his shoes still on. Oh, that's so annoying. That would piss me off.
So annoying. Before my boyfriend gets in the bed, I'm like, please don't get in this bed until you brush your feet off because there are crumbs.
Yeah.
And then I literally like wipe all the crumbs out of the bed, and I'm like, I'm gonna buy a handheld Hoover. Like,
My boyfriend literally complains every single time we get into bed. He's like, I don't get how you get it so crummy. And my sister said the same thing. I don't know why my bed's always dirty, and I just never even notice. I just don't care. But like, I don't even bring my shoes. It's just my crummy feet.
someone said over complimenting me jokes. I actually love that. Now, to be fair, my boyfriend compliments me all the time.
Yeah. No comment.
Oof.
Someone else said taking ages to reply. I can relate so much.
Yeah. I mean, my boyfriend doesn't, so I can't relate.
So, should we move on to our second thing we saw on the internet?
Yes.
I saw a Bristruth. Bristruth is like basically when you go to uni, people make Facebook pages in which people can send anonymous confessions, and then the people that run the page post them. So anyway, a Bristruth is just an anonymous confession from a student. Someone said, I've only ever had one sexual partner, and since splitting a year ago, I haven't had sex since. It makes me worry about my performance and what's normal / is this an irrational fear?
I don't think it's irrational, but I don't think you need to worry. Like, in my opinion, you can go ages without having sex. And obviously, yeah, you're going to be worried about it because you have all this time to think about it. But when it actually comes down to it, you're like, it's like instincts. Like, you just kind of know what to do, especially if you've had a lot of sex before. Even if it's just been with one sexual partner, I think you have some idea at least. Like, it's not like you're a virgin. Not that there's anything wrong with a virgin.
It's not like you've completely forgotten everything or anything like that, but I do completely get that because I remember after I had my first relationship, I was terrified to sleep with anyone else because I only knew what it's like to have to sleep with one person. And even though it's not like you forget how to have sex or what sex is like, it is really scary because then you're like, oh shit, are my ideas of sex a bit skewed because I don't actually know what it's like to have sex with anyone other than this person? And I do think that there's quite a lot of validity to everyone is very different, and having sex with any given person will be quite a different experience. And I think having sex for the first time, not in terms of your first time ever, but also just the first time with any like a new person is really scary, especially if you hadn't had sex in a while. Like me and my friends always joke that your virginity grows back.
That's so reassuring.
Yeah, I don't know, it's kind of bad, but it's a joke. But it is kind of, in terms of if you haven't had sex in a while, it's so scary to get out there. It's almost as though you've never had sex before, and I completely sympathize with it. Can be really scary. But what I would say to this person, or who anyone that's thinking this way, because I've a friend of mine literally is like going through this right now. I mean, not same thing, but he just hasn't had sex in a while. And I would say pick a person. If you're someone that's like fine with casual sex and that's something you do, pick a person that you're not that attracted to. Like, obviously you have to be attracted to them in some kind of way to shag them, but if you pick someone that you're not, like, it's not someone that you're trying to see or someone that you're trying to date or whatever, then you will be less scared because you won't be like scared that you're gonna fuck it up. And I can imagine as a guy it's even more scary than a girl, because at the end of the day, like, sometimes as a girl you know that you can just lie there and do nothing and it will be fine, whereas like the boy has to like conduct the situation. Not always, I'm not saying it as a rule.
I think it depends. Yeah. But like, yeah, maybe then if you're a guy, choose a girl who you know is really sexually confident and she'll like lead the way, and then you have to worry less. Yeah, maybe friends with benefits would be a good situation for you to like bridge that gap if you're thinking you want to be in another relationship or you want to sleep with someone long term, because then you kind of like, you know, you're like comfortable with the person, so you don't have to worry about the other person being a dick if you're not like, if you feel like nervous.
Also, at the end of the day, you shouldn't worry, because there are a lot of people out there that don't know exactly what they're doing, and I think as long as you're just kind of honest and you just kind of try your best, the other person's not going to be a dick. Like, at the end of the day, they're sleeping with you, and if someone that you're sleeping with isn't treating you very nicely, then maybe you shouldn't be sleeping with them in the first place.
Or go in the opposite direction, have shit tons of one night stands and just fake it till you make it, baby. Okay, so the last one, I also saw this on Reddit. Unpopular opinion, but if you're going to hang out with a friend, here's a tip: don't bring your significant other. You want your friend to feel like a third wheel, like a loner? No, then don't do it unless they offer, or you are all actually friends, but even then your friend didn't ask your partner to hang out, they asked you, don't do it. But my partner and I aren't like that in public. Doesn't matter. If your friend has had even one bad experience of their buddies going off to make out and then being left alone, it's going to put a damper on the whole day. Please respect your platonic relationships at the same time high regard as your romantic ones. That doesn't make sense, but anyway, I have like mixed feelings about this. Firstly, I completely get the like feeling like a third wheel, but it's also like, get over yourself. There's going to be so many times in your life where you have to be a third wheel. You're not going to be completely involved. Yeah, it is kind of shit, but don't just sit there and like resent your friend. Like, if you have a problem, then say something to them. Don't just like write salty posts like this one on the internet and expect them to read your mind. And I don't agree with that if your friend has had even one bad experience. That's not really a valid reason. Like, what, your friend's responsible for every other bad experience that you've had?
Yeah, I agree. And I also think, I don't know, theoretically, I would hope that I could message my friends and ask if my boyfriend can come and expect them to answer honestly. I don't know. I feel like if you don't feel like you can tell your friend, like, no, fuck off, I want to see you, or I mean, you can go about it a little more nicely, I feel like you should aim to be able to tell your friend that, at least. Because if you can't be honest with your friend, you're just, it's gonna cause a lot more trouble than just this one little problem, I think. And then also in terms of, don't always be that person that's texting, oh, can my boyfriend come? Like, I don't think it's wrong to ask if your boyfriend can come to things, and I mean, I'm very much guilty of this one. But I do think if you're doing it every single time to every single plan, and then you're only seeing your friends with your boyfriend, and you're also seeing your boyfriend on top of that, so you're basically just seeing your boyfriend and then your friends a little bit, that can cause all sorts of problems of their own. I just feel like it's important to keep some kind of balance and keep your friends round and definitely give time to them. Don't just completely give all your time to your boyfriend or whatever.
Yeah, and I think it's fine if it's like a balance as well. Like, I feel like it's unfair of the friend to expect their friend to not integrate their platonic and romantic relationships. Like, as their friend, you should want to get to know and like spend time with their significant other, in my opinion, because that's like what I want of my friendships with my boyfriend. So I think it's normal for someone to want to bring their romantic partner, and you have to like find a way of feeling okay with that. And like, maybe it's good for you to like see people in relationships, because I think that's all part of like building your understanding of healthy relationships too. But if it gets too much, or it's like every single time your friend has to bring their partner, then yeah, obviously say something. But I think if it's balanced, then it really is fine. Just don't be a baby. Come on. Okay, so this is the main part of this episode where we are going to be talking about dating people from other cultures. We want to talk about our own experiences, but obviously keep it quite general so that you guys can relate, or maybe you get some insight into what it's like and the benefits of dating people from other cultures. So I'm dating an American man. American
I'm dating
boy.
a French guy.
Yeah. So we obviously, I'm British and Maria's like British culturally. But I think it's kind of interesting to look at the different like nuances of dating someone from another culture, because at our age, you would look at it and think, oh, it's not really a big deal. But I think considering that we're like 20, we're still at uni. And if you think about before we went to uni, our views of the world and like our perspectives of the world went pretty much unchallenged. Or like, at least for me, maybe for you, because you like moved from one country to another. Whereas I've always lived in London. I've always been around people that are from London. So I feel like my perspective of how the world should be has gone pretty unchallenged until I went to uni. It's kind of interesting when you go to uni because you realize, oh wow, like my way of seeing things and doing things isn't how everyone else does things.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an eye-opener. And then dating someone from another culture, you kind of get an even more in-depth insight into like, wow, there are so many different ways of living in the world. And like, it might sound this might, to anyone who's like older, I'm thinking like this might sound really naive, but if you think back to when you were like 18, I'm sure the world was pretty much the same to you at the time. And I think this is something that people might not really think about if they're just going about their day-to-day lives, but we want to talk about it specifically in relation to dating.
Yeah, and I was saying earlier how it's really weird because when you go into it, it's not like I was thinking or you were thinking already consciously like, oh, I'm about to go into a relationship with a French guy or an American guy, and what does that really mean? And I feel like I wasn't thinking of what that really meant, and I didn't even, it's not like I would have even known what that meant unless I actually went ahead and did it. But I do think that if you're in the position of getting into a relationship with someone that's from a different country or a different culture or whatever, you just take a little step back and kind of think about what that's going to mean, what their life realistically looks like versus yours. And that goes as well to people that are thinking of dating someone that has something that is very starkly different to their lifestyle, or it doesn't have to be a cultural difference or a nationality difference or whatever. I don't know, just really think about those differences and what that really means in your day-to-day life and what that will mean in you guys as a couple.
Yeah, and I think when you're younger as well, all the differences are really, really heightened. Like you meet someone and it's so new, it's such a fresh thing. Whereas I feel like obviously as you get older, you just kind of grow accustomed and you really accept that. I'm not saying this is like where we are in our lives, I'm just saying that's what I've noticed in observing people who are older than us. Like you kind of have a more well-rounded view of the world and you've come into contact with so many more people, or like at least the adults I've seen are like, I'm not saying this is how it is in like middle America or anything like that, because it isn't. I think we have reached a really weird stage with dating in that I feel like I've always been aware of people who kind of romanticize dating someone who's like a French boy or like dating an Italian guy, which is kind of weird if you think about it. And like what you were saying about when you get into a relationship with someone from another culture, you don't really think, oh, this is what I'm about to do. But like I was thinking, my boyfriend literally asked me out because I was British. And like he didn't even admit it for like the first 3 months I knew him. But I remember when I met him, literally all we talked about was like me being like, hey, my name's Honey, he's like, hey, my name's blah, 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 and then doing an impersonation of my British accent. And that was our whole conversation. And then he was like, oh, like, let me get your number, I can show you around. But for like the first 3 months I was like, well, why did you even ask me out? Like, oh, it's just because I was British, isn't it? And he's like, no, I swear. And then he finally admitted it, and he was like, how did you know that?
Yeah, my boyfriend like has always loved British accents on girls, and I always ask him like, oh, if I didn't have an English accent, would you still date me? And he's like, oh, no, probably not.
Yeah, but it's kind of weird because I don't really like American accents, but I don't think I'd date my boyfriend if he had a British accent, because whenever he does a British accent, it's so
Yeah, but he'd just
terrible.
speak
And I
like a
mean,
normal English person. He wouldn't sound like an American with an English accent. He'd just sound like a
yeah,
normal
I know, but he
person.
looks like an American. He like looks like the epitome of an American. He only wears like short-sleeved shirts and like slides
Yeah,
everywhere
but
we
if he was
go,
English,
even
he
when it's
wouldn't wear that,
raining.
would he?
Yeah, I know exactly. That's what I'm saying. If he had a British accent and he looked like how he does, I'd be like, this doesn't equate. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit sidetracked from the point, but
Well, I actually wanted to say that also other things that come with age in terms of cultural differences or just general differences with people. I feel like the older you get, the more you, not necessarily, but the more you get to know yourself, and sort of the more you distinguish, okay, what is just part of my upbringing and tradition, and what is what I actually believe, what is what I actually think. And you kind of start to form your own identity away from your upbringing and away from all the ties that, not necessarily, like you might lean more towards it, but it's in you start to, yeah, basically decide for yourself what you actually do believe, what you don't, and kind of leave that cultural identity in its place.
well, that's interesting that you say that, because for me, I feel like the older I get, the more I realize like how much I am like my mom and like my grandma and like my aunt, because like I come from, like, we always joke that the women in my family are really, really like strong matriarchal women, and we're like the heads of the households, because we are. And it's just kind of a joke in my family that like the men don't really get a say in what goes on. And like my mom raised me as well, and I think we're going to do an episode about like how your upbringing affects like your romantic and like friendship relationships and that kind of thing. But like, because I was raised by a single mom, and she was like a very strong, confident woman, that is kind of how I am. And if you think about most of the cultures in the world, and like the ones that are dictated like by religion, that's like not necessarily how things go. So I think that's kind of like incompatible with a lot of things, or like a lot of people's like expectations. And that's why there's so many clashes with like people not liking women to be outspoken, and that's a whole other thing in itself to do with the patriarchy, but that's a story for another day. Yeah, so I feel like I'm really aligned with my familial upbringing and my familial views. And it's kind of like I'm very set in my ways, so I kind of struggle with, like, I think I'm really stubborn in a lot of ways in terms of accepting that other people aren't the same as me. And I think that's kind of a big thing in my family, and like I am trying to work on that, because obviously I'm dating an American boy and things are very, very different in America. So yeah, it's interesting that you say that, even though I'm like very, like, I would say I'm like very well educated and like I've lived in America, so I know how it is. I still struggle to equate the like flexibility of reacting to someone else's culture with like me being very set in my ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
I think as well, when you're young, like you really expect people to like accommodate to what you want and accommodate to your expectations. Yeah, you expect people to like meet you halfway. You want them to find a compromise, and obviously compromising is the solution to a lot of things if you clash with your partner, but there are things that you have to be able to step back and be like, okay, well, this is an integral part of their culture, and me just disagreeing with them in this one conversation isn't necessarily going to change their view like overnight. Maybe it's something that you work on together if they're willing, but you also shouldn't have the expectation that they're suddenly going to change just because it's not compatible with your worldview. I don't think my boyfriend will mind me saying this, but we like recently have been clashing quite a lot because of his views on guns and the Second Amendment, and I find it really difficult to talk about without getting super heated because it's so obvious to me, and I think to just literally everyone outside of America. Well, not everyone, obviously there are some people who still believe that like it's our right to bear arms or whatever, but looking from the outside in a country where having guns isn't legal, like that's a part of our culture, and it's like we don't have school shootings, so it's crazy to us that in a country where there are so many like mass shootings and school shootings, they still sell guns to anyone. Like you can just walk off the street and buy a gun. But I have to be able to step back and be like, okay, well, this is like the country that he was brought up in. Like, yeah, he's from California, but California isn't as liberal as it might seem to outsiders if you really like dig deep into it. That's something that we like fundamentally disagree on, but me being able to like step back and be like, okay, well, realistically, is this something that I can just change his opinion on overnight? No, but maybe we can find a middle ground in some way. Like we do agree on some things and some aspects of how guns should be sold, blah, blah, blah. And we can kind of reach an agreement, even if it's just agree to disagree, where it's not just me bringing it up all the time because I'm like, you're all fucking stupid because you're an American. To like antagonize him, which is like something that I have done in the past. But I'm not proud of it, but it's something that like it is difficult, and this is what I think people don't really like recognize is it is difficult to date someone if you have such a fundamental culture clash. But are you gonna break up with them because of the negative aspects when there's also so many positives you can get from it? Like, no.
I think in terms of differences that come from dating someone who's from a different country, my experience hasn't been so much like fundamental disagreements, but it's more so that dating a French guy comes with having a language barrier in some kind of way, even though he speaks fluent English and so does his family, and he was raised like speaking English because his parents are American and Irish. That doesn't mean that his social life, like with his whole friends, his whole school life, so his whole life is based in a different language in a different country, and then that makes it really difficult for me because I feel like in my boyfriend's head it's very compartmentalized. Like he has his Bristol uni life in which he speaks English, in which I exist, and then he has his Paris life in which his friends exist and his social life exists and all of that stuff, but I don't exist and I can't really quite enter because we speak a different language. And that's been really difficult. I think I just find it really sad to not be able to like hang out with his friends and get along with them, and they get to know me and I get to know them, which I don't think that he sees as that big of a problem, which fair enough. It's just obviously a disagreement, like we don't see eye to eye in it, and it's caused like quite a few arguments, but I mean all you can really do is work on it, and like I'm trying to learn French so I can, it's like a big important thing for me, therefore I'm just gonna go and like try to learn French and try to get involved more in that life. And I do think that it is something that you have to really think about, like, are you willing to feel excluded out of your partner's life sometimes? Because even if they do their very best to constantly involve you, there will be times where they will be speaking another language, or even not language. Like sometimes you go hang out with your boyfriend's friends and you get completely left out of the inside joke because you're not part of it. Like everyone gets left out sometimes with their boyfriend's friends or girlfriend's friends and whatever, but I think that the added element of that language barrier, you really do have to consider whether it's something that you can deal with and get over or work with, because it's something that I don't think I quite thought about as much as I maybe should have.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with like cultural differences as well, is like when you're getting to know someone, or like when you're just starting off seeing them and you're like falling in love or whatever, it kind of just seems like irrelevant because you want to get to know the person. You don't want to get to know the culture. And it sounds stupid because obviously culture is such an inherent part. I feel like the cultural aspects of our personalities kind of come out more in the later stages of a relationship, as in maybe past the honeymoon stage, when you're like getting to know like what it's like to live with them and like all the nitty gritty things, like how do they do the washing up, how do they cook this one thing, like how do they talk to their parents, is not something you would really notice on a date so much.
Yeah.
It's kind of difficult to see it from the start and make an informed decision. But I think it's something that I definitely wish I would have thought about early on, because thinking back, it does provide an explanation for so many of like our miscommunications and like disagreements. It's fundamentally like a different way of communicating, a different way of joking and like sarcasm, which makes me seem like a dick, and like which he doesn't understand, and all these things that I just didn't think about because I was living in America at the time. So I was like, oh, I'm so assimilated to the culture, but obviously I'm not. Like I lived there for 3 months, so how could I be? But it's kind of hard to step back and distinguish this is a cultural thing instead of like, oh, this is something to do with us as individuals.
Another point, like I think in the end those are just personality traits in turn. Those cultural traits that they have, the way they do things, that kind of just does translate in some way or another to a personality trait. So then do we have anything really to say about like how to get more good out of those differences that you find them bad?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important, just overall, regardless of whether it's a romantic or platonic relationship, to like expand your understanding of the world to different ways of doing things and different views. Even if you don't necessarily agree, you're like challenging yourself and challenging how set you are in your ways. And as I was saying, like I really struggle with that, so I know that's something I really have to work on. And being constantly faced with my boyfriend's ways of doing things and like perspectives, it can be challenging, of course it can, but in the end you love this person and you want to grow from a relationship. That's always the goal, is to grow in yourself and help the other person grow too. So you have to be willing to compromise and like concede on certain points. It's kind of like a pick your battles kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. I think pick your battles and don't expect things from people that you wouldn't do for them. As in, if you're really upset about them not wanting to carry on a tradition or something like that, or not wanting to see things your way, but then when they're trying to teach you something or show you something, you're not willing to see things their way, then you're just kind of gonna be stuck in this back and forth. Like you can't expect things from people that you're not willing to give. And I think, yeah, also just see it as a learning experience for sure. I think I've just grown up being pretty open about other people and kind of knowing how to deal with people that have points of view that differ from yours quite a lot. I think because I've basically grown up in a relationship in which I constantly have to battle a cultural difference. Like my parents, they're very culturally Mexican, like they're Mexican through and through. And even though they've grown a lot and learned a lot since being in London, I have a daily relationship with them in which I have to negotiate kind of how to meet each other in the middle and how to teach each other things. And I think as long as you can remember that that person can teach you just as much as you can teach them, probably, because I think a lot of the time with these things we come from a place of, oh, I know more than you, I'm actually right in this, and let me convince you and teach you the way. I think as long as you can remember that they probably also have a lot of valuable things to teach you, which is true. I've learned a lot from my parents, I've learned a lot from my boyfriend in terms of just cultural differences.
And I'm really it's grateful. Like tolerance all
just keep
around.
An open mind. It will teach you patience, as you were saying before.
And I think it's like a vulnerability issue as well. Like I just read a book about vulnerability called Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And she kind of talks about all the ways in which we as a society hold ourselves back from being vulnerable, because vulnerability is seen as a weakness. But actually, if you're able to like let down your guard and like not be as stubborn and not think your way is the only way, then it kind of allows so many more routes to be opened up to you and so many more options for like compassion and lovingness, which is never a bad thing.
So any parting thoughts?
I would say even if me and my boyfriend broke up and I never dated someone from another culture, only British people ever again, I feel I've learned a lot about just even having an insight into like the differences in American and British personalities and cultures, which you would expect to be the most similar out of any countries. Like America and the UK kind of like you would expect to be the same, but there's so many differences, and you kind of get a real insight into how environment and upbringing and family really impact someone. And like that's something that I can apply to pretty much anyone hopefully in the future, and like have more understanding towards them, even though I'm not saying I've reached the peak of like my understanding of my boyfriend, because like it is a constant journey, but hopefully I'm like on the right track, and hopefully it will make me like more open to meeting and understanding other cultures and people in the future.
I think keep an open mind and go for it. Really think about what you're getting into. Really think about what you can really handle and like how fragile you really are, and how, as you were saying, vulnerable you're willing to be, because it will be harder for sure than dating someone that's English and grew up in your school and like around the same part of wherever you grew up. You know what I mean? It's always easy to go out with someone that's had pretty much like the same life as you, because you'll see eye to eye on everything and shit like that. But it's really fun, and you get to meet a lot of new people. You get to go to a new city all the time. Yeah. From my personal experience.
Can't relate. Yeah, but hopefully I'll be able to go to LA in future.
You guys can follow us on Instagram at Sextress Podcast, and email us on sextresspodcast@gmail.com. Send us any of your stories, your questions, literally anything that you want to say to us. Email us, DM us. We don't judge, and we would love to hear what you guys have to say. Oh yeah, show us stuff that you want to discuss that you see on the internet at these little end segments that we bring to the table.
We are going to start a little competition, if you will, for the segments that we have for the episodes, which you will find only on our Instagram. Probably we might start posting it on Facebook, but yeah, our Instagram at Sextras Podcast, or on our personal Instagrams. Mine's at _HoneyWyatt.
And mine's at MadgeHaytales. It will be in the description.
We usually post on our stories the questions for the segment, and that's how we get our content for that. But we are actually going to be starting a little competition where the person who sends us the best submission for that week, we will send you a sticker. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Please rate us, review us. It really helps us out, and it helps new people find us. And yeah, subscribe, and we will see you next week.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Sextras, Presented by Honey Jane Wyatt and Maria Jose Hayodatiyi. Produced by Mabel Productions.